Stoicism teaches us to embrace reason and clarity in our relationships, especially when it comes to boundaries and respect. At its core, Stoicism emphasizes the importance of understanding what is within our control and what is not. This distinction is critical when navigating the emotional complexities of love and relationships. Boundaries are not walls to shut others out. They are frameworks to preserve our inner peace while engaging with the world in a healthy and meaningful way. A Stoic would approach boundaries with the understanding that our peace of mind is a precious resource. Epictetus, one of the most profound Stoic philosophers, reminds us that we cannot control the actions of others, but we can control our responses to them. If someone repeatedly disrespects our boundaries, the Stoic response is not to retaliate or harbor resentment, but to calmly and firmly reinforce those boundaries while maintaining our composure. Respect, both for ourselves and others, is a cornerstone of this practice. In relationships, it's easy to blur the lines between love and dependency. Marcus Aurelius advises us to view others as partners in a shared experience, not as extensions of ourselves. True love, guided by Stoic principles, respects individuality and autonomy. This means recognizing that each person has their own nature, desires, and limitations. Attempting to control or change someone else is not only unproductive, but also contrary to the Stoic ideal of focusing only on what we can influence, our own thoughts and actions. Boundaries in Stoicism are also deeply tied to the concept of self-respect. Seneca eloquently states that the highest form of respect is self-respect. Without it, we cannot genuinely respect others. When we set boundaries, we're not being selfish, we are honoring our worth. Healthy boundaries ensure that we do not become enablers of behavior that harms us or the other person. By refusing to accept disrespect, we encourage others to reflect on their actions and perhaps grow themselves. Respect, from a Stoic perspective, is grounded in justice, a cardinal virtue of Stoicism. Justice is about giving others their due, but it also includes ensuring that we are treated fairly. It is not unkind to expect respect from others. Rather, it is a reflection of the balance Stoicism seeks to cultivate. When someone violates our boundaries, we can respond with firmness, guided by reason rather than anger. Anger clouds judgment and leads to actions we may later regret, while reason allows us to address the issue constructively. A Stoic approach to love and respect also involves clear communication. Many boundary violations stem not from malice, but from misunderstanding. Communicating our needs and limits with calmness and clarity is a skill that Stoicism encourages. When we articulate our boundaries without accusation or emotional excess, we foster understanding rather than conflict. Seneca advises us to speak not from a place of wounded pride, but from a desire to maintain harmony and mutual respect. One of the greatest challenges in setting boundaries is the fear of losing relationships. A Stoic would remind us that clinging to relationships out of fear is a form of attachment that hinders our freedom. Epictetus teaches that true freedom comes from detaching ourselves from outcomes and focusing on living virtuously. If someone cannot respect our boundaries, their departure may be painful, but ultimately necessary for our well-being. It is better to endure the temporary discomfort of loss than to sacrifice our integrity and peace of mind. Stoicism also offers tools to handle the guilt or doubt that can accompany boundary setting. When we act in accordance with reason and virtue, we have nothing to feel guilty about. Marcus Aurelius advises us to reflect on our actions honestly and to trust that acting justly is always the right course. If we set a boundary and someone reacts negatively, their reaction is not within our control. What matters is that we acted with fairness and respect, both for ourselves and for them. A Stoic's commitment to boundaries and respect extends not only to romantic relationships, but also to friendships, family ties, and professional interactions. In all these realms, the principles remain the same: clarity, reason, and a steadfast dedication to living in alignment with virtue. By practicing these principles, we not only protect our own well-being, but also model behavior that can inspire others to adopt similar approaches. Stoicism teaches us that love and respect thrive not in chaos or coercion, but in the order and harmony that healthy boundaries create. By embracing these principles, we cultivate relationships that are not only enduring but also enriching, rooted in mutual understanding and the shared pursuit of virtue. Boundaries are not barriers. They are bridges to healthier, more fulfilling connections. Through Stoicism, we learn to value both love and self-respect, knowing that the two are not in conflict but are deeply intertwined. The Stoic approach to boundaries and respect is deeply tied to understanding human nature. People act according to their perceptions, beliefs, and internal struggles. Marcus Aurelius reflects on this often, reminding us that when someone acts unjustly, they do so out of ignorance or misguided reasoning. This perspective doesn't excuse poor behavior, but it allows us to approach boundary setting without malice or resentment. By recognizing the imperfections in others, we create space for patience and empathy, even as we uphold our own values. In the practice of Stoicism, emotional detachment is not about apathy, but about maintaining a steady state of mind. When someone challenges our boundaries, our initial reaction may be frustration or anger. These emotions, while natural, are signals for reflection. Seneca advises us to pause and examine our emotions before acting. Ask yourself, is this boundary truly aligned with my values, or am I reacting out of pride or fear? Am I enforcing this boundary with calm conviction, or am I driven by the need to punish or control? Another critical element in Stoic boundary setting is the role of forgiveness. While boundaries are essential for self-respect and mutual understanding, people will inevitably fail us, just as we fail them. Stoicism encourages us to temper our expectations of others, recognizing that human fallibility is universal. Forgiveness, however, does not mean abandoning our boundaries. It means addressing violations without harboring bitterness. When someone crosses a line, we can address it directly and firmly, then move forward without dwelling on the transgression. Forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves as much as others, freeing us from the emotional burden of holding grudges. A powerful practice in Stoicism is premeditatio malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This involves mentally preparing for challenges and potential violations of our boundaries. Imagine scenarios where someone disregards your needs or fails to show respect. Visualize how you would respond in a way that aligns with reason and virtue. By rehearsing these situations in your mind, you strengthen your ability to handle them calmly and effectively when they arise. This proactive mindset fosters resilience, ensuring that boundary violations do not destabilize your inner peace. Another vital concept in Stoicism is the discipline of action, which emphasizes taking deliberate, virtuous steps in every situation. When setting boundaries, this means not only deciding where your limits lie, but also consistently enforcing them. Consistency is key. If you allow others to violate your boundaries without consequences, you send mixed messages about your expectations. Stoicism teaches us to act with integrity, ensuring that our words and actions are aligned. If you say this behavior is unacceptable but continue to tolerate it, you erode your own credibility and undermine the boundary itself. The practice of setting boundaries also requires a deep understanding of your own values. What is truly important to you? What behaviors are incompatible with your principles? Stoicism encourages us to clarify our values through self-reflection and philosophical study. When your boundaries are rooted in genuine principles rather than fleeting emotions, they become unshakable. For example, if honesty is a core value, you might set a boundary against deceit in your relationships. This boundary is not arbitrary. It reflects your commitment to living a life of integrity. Stoicism also emphasizes the power of example. When we set and maintain healthy boundaries, we demonstrate to others how to live with self-respect and dignity. This silent teaching can influence those around us, encouraging them to adopt similar practices. Marcus Aurelius often speaks of leading by example, noting that actions speak louder than words. When we navigate relationships with both firmness and compassion, we show others that boundaries are not acts of hostility, but expressions of care. Care for ourselves and for the quality of the relationship. Another crucial aspect of Stoic practice is accepting outcomes with equanimity. Even when we set clear boundaries and communicate them effectively, others may choose not to respect them. This is beyond our control. The Stoic response is not to despair or retaliate, but to accept reality as it is. If a relationship cannot survive the enforcement of healthy boundaries, then that relationship was not aligned with virtue or mutual respect. Loss is a natural part of life, and the Stoics teach us to face it with grace, focusing instead on the relationships and opportunities that remain. In romantic relationships, the application of Stoic principles to boundaries is particularly transformative. Love, from a Stoic perspective, is not about possession or dependency, but about a shared journey toward virtue. When we set boundaries with a partner, we are not pushing them away. We are inviting them to engage with us in a healthier, more meaningful way. True love respects individuality and autonomy, allowing each person to grow while supporting the other. Stoicism reminds us that love thrives in an environment of mutual respect, not in the chaos of unchecked emotions or blurred boundaries. Similarly, in friendships and family relationships, Stoicism encourages us to maintain boundaries that preserve our peace of mind. These relationships, while deeply important, can sometimes become sources of strain if boundaries are neglected. By approaching these connections with the same Stoic principles of clarity, reason, and compassion, we ensure that they remain sources of support and joy rather than stress and conflict. Stoicism teaches us that boundaries and respect are acts of love, love for ourselves and for others. They are not about exclusion, but about creating the conditions for genuine connection. By practicing these principles consistently, we cultivate relationships that are not only more harmonious, but also more enduring. Through Stoicism, we learn that the foundation of healthy love is not control or compromise, but the mutual recognition of each other's inherent worth and dignity. In practicing Stoicism, we must also examine how our attachment to others influences our boundaries. Attachment, in the Stoic sense, often stems from a misunderstanding of what brings true fulfillment. As Epictetus reminds us, you're disturbed not by things, but by your opinions about them. When we cling to relationships or fear losing someone who disrespects us, we're not really valuing the person, but rather the idea of what we think they represent. This attachment can make us reluctant to set boundaries, as we fear rejection, conflict, or abandonment. Stoicism teaches us to question these fears and reframe our attachment to align with reason and virtue. Boundaries, from a Stoic perspective, are not ultimatums, but opportunities for growth, both for ourselves and for others. When someone violates a boundary, it's an invitation for us to exercise patience, understanding, and courage. We must remember that we cannot force others to respect us. We can only guide them through our actions and words. If they choose to disregard our boundaries, it reflects their nature, not ours. This distinction frees us from taking their behavior personally, a common source of unnecessary suffering. The practice of Stoicism also encourages us to consider the long-term effects of our boundaries. Are they creating an environment that fosters mutual growth, or are they rigid to the point of alienation? While firmness is essential, so too is flexibility rooted in reason. For example, a friend who occasionally forgets to respect your time may not be acting out of malice, but out of a lapse in attention. In such cases, the Stoic response is not to react harshly, but to address the issue with kindness and clarity. However, if the pattern persists and begins to disrupt your life, it may be necessary to reassess the relationship. Stoicism teaches us to balance compassion with rationality, ensuring that our boundaries remain both humane and effective. Another layer of Stoicism's guidance on boundaries involves understanding our triggers and emotional responses. When a boundary is crossed, it often provokes an immediate emotional reaction: anger, hurt, or disappointment. Stoicism does not ask us to suppress these feelings, but to examine them. Marcus Aurelius advises us to strip away the complaint by saying, "I have been harmed," and erase the complaint, "I have been harmed," and the harm is erased. This reflection encourages us to look beyond the surface of the situation. Was the harm intentional? Is our reaction proportionate? By engaging in this internal dialogue, we can respond to boundary violations in a way that reflects our highest values rather than our fleeting emotions. Respect, both given and received, is another cornerstone of this practice. Respect in Stoicism is not about flattery or blind agreement, but about recognizing the inherent dignity of all people. When we respect ourselves, we set boundaries that reflect our worth. When we respect others, we honor their autonomy and do not demand that they conform to our expectations. This mutual respect creates the foundation for relationships that are both virtuous and fulfilling. Stoicism teaches us to view others as our equals, sharing the same human vulnerabilities and aspirations. This perspective fosters empathy, even when we must enforce difficult boundaries. One of the most challenging aspects of boundary setting is navigating relationships with loved ones who resist change. A Stoic approach to such situations involves practicing what Seneca calls rehearsed acceptance. We prepare ourselves mentally for the possibility that our boundaries may not be well received and that others may react with hostility, confusion, or indifference. By accepting these possibilities in advance, we reduce the emotional impact if they come to pass. This practice is not about resignation, but about resilience, choosing to act in accordance with our values, regardless of external reactions. Stoicism also encourages us to cultivate gratitude even in the context of difficult relationships. Gratitude, paradoxically, can coexist with boundary setting. When we enforce a boundary with someone we care about, we can still appreciate the positive aspects of the relationship. Gratitude does not mean tolerating disrespect. It means recognizing the good while addressing the bad. This balanced perspective prevents us from falling into bitterness or cynicism, allowing us to approach boundary setting with a sense of fairness and proportion. The role of self-discipline in maintaining boundaries cannot be overstated. Stoicism places great emphasis on the discipline of will, the ability to remain steadfast in the face of temptation or pressure. When someone tests our boundaries, we may feel tempted to relent, especially if the person is persuasive or the relationship feels important. Yet, as Epictetus reminds us, true freedom comes from mastery over ourselves. By standing firm in our boundaries, we exercise this self-mastery, reinforcing not only the boundary itself, but also our commitment to living virtuously. Another profound insight from Stoicism is the concept of cosmopolitanism, the idea that we are all part of a greater whole, interconnected in ways we often overlook. This perspective can reshape how we view boundaries. Setting boundaries is not an act of division, but an acknowledgement of the natural limits that make relationships function harmoniously. Just as the planets follow their orbits to maintain cosmic order, individuals must honor personal boundaries to sustain healthy relationships. This interconnectedness also reminds us that our actions ripple outward, influencing others in ways we may not immediately see. By respecting boundaries, we contribute to the greater good of our shared human community. Stoicism invites us to continually reflect and refine our practices. Boundary setting is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of self-awareness, communication, and adjustment. The Stoic practice of journaling can be particularly helpful here. By reflecting on our interactions each day, we can identify where our boundaries were honored or tested and how we responded. This practice not only sharpens our understanding of ourselves, but also prepares us to handle future challenges with greater wisdom and composure. Through Stoicism, boundaries and respect are elevated from mere interpersonal tools to profound expressions of virtue. They become acts of courage, wisdom, justice, and temperance. By embracing these principles, we navigate the complexities of love and relationships with a steadiness that reflects the best within us. Stoicism teaches us that boundaries are not limits to love, but pathways to its truest and healthiest form. A love rooted in mutual respect, understanding, and the shared pursuit of a virtuous life. Stoicism offers us a profound framework for navigating the delicate balance between asserting our needs and respecting the autonomy of others. At its heart, this philosophy reminds us that our primary duty is to live in harmony with nature and reason, which includes maintaining relationships that reflect our commitment to virtue and balance. Boundaries, then, are not acts of selfishness, but expressions of this harmony, acts of self-respect that also pave the way for healthier interactions. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or platonic, boundaries define the space where mutual respect flourishes. When boundaries are absent, confusion and conflict often take their place. From a Stoic perspective, allowing such disorder to persist would be a failure to exercise the cardinal virtues, particularly wisdom and justice. Wisdom helps us discern where our boundaries should lie, what aligns with our values and what does not. Justice ensures that we enforce these boundaries fairly, treating others with the same respect we expect for ourselves. One of the challenges Stoics face in setting boundaries is balancing firmness with compassion. Compassion, as understood by the Stoics, is not about indulging others' whims or tolerating harmful behavior. Instead, it involves understanding the motives and struggles of those who may cross our boundaries. Marcus Aurelius encourages us to remember that each person we encounter is acting according to their own understanding of the world, which may be flawed or limited. Recognizing this helps us to enforce our boundaries without unnecessary harshness. For example, when a loved one fails to respect a limit we've set, instead of reacting with anger, we might calmly explain why the boundary is important and how it contributes to a healthier relationship. Moreover, Stoicism teaches us to view boundary violations as opportunities for growth. When someone disregards a boundary, it forces us to exercise virtues like courage, patience, and temperance. Courage is needed to stand firm and reiterate our position. Patience helps us address the situation without letting frustration dictate our actions. Temperance ensures that our response is measured, avoiding extremes of either passivity or aggression. In this way, each challenge becomes a chance to practice the Stoic art of living, turning potential conflict into a moment of philosophical application. Another key principle in Stoic boundary setting is the acknowledgement of impermanence. Relationships, like all things, are subject to change. Marcus Aurelius often reflects on the transient nature of life, reminding us that clinging too tightly to anything, whether people, status, or possessions, leads to suffering. This perspective can be liberating when setting boundaries, as it allows us to detach from the fear of losing relationships that no longer align with our values. If someone repeatedly disrespects our boundaries and refuses to change, Stoicism gives us the courage to let go, understanding that our primary obligation is to live virtuously, not to preserve every connection at all costs. The practice of setting boundaries is also deeply intertwined with the Stoic concept of eudaimonia, or flourishing. Flourishing in Stoicism is achieved by living in accordance with reason and virtue, which includes creating an environment that supports our growth and well-being. Boundaries protect this environment, ensuring that we are not dragged into unnecessary conflicts, distractions, or toxic dynamics. By setting boundaries, we create the mental and emotional space necessary to focus on what truly matters: our character, our contributions to the world, and our relationships with those who uplift and inspire us. Stoicism also emphasizes the importance of self-awareness in this process. Regular reflection, whether through journaling, meditation, or philosophical dialogue, helps us understand our own limits and triggers. What behaviors drain our energy or compromise our peace of mind? What patterns in our relationships need to be addressed? By cultivating this self-awareness, we can set boundaries proactively rather than reactively, anticipating challenges and addressing them with clarity and foresight. In addition to self-awareness, Stoicism teaches us to cultivate emotional resilience. When a boundary is crossed, it's easy to feel disrespected or powerless. However, the Stoic mindset reframes these moments as opportunities to exercise control over our inner world. As Epictetus famously said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When faced with a boundary violation, we can choose to remain calm, reaffirming our values without letting anger or resentment take hold. This emotional resilience not only strengthens our relationships, but also reinforces our sense of self-efficacy, reminding us that our peace of mind is always within our control. Another profound insight from Stoicism is the role of gratitude in boundary setting. While boundaries are often associated with limiting negative behaviors, they also highlight the positive aspects of our relationships. For instance, when we set a boundary that is respected, we can express gratitude for the mutual understanding and care that such respect demonstrates. This practice of gratitude helps us focus on what is working in our relationships, fostering a sense of appreciation that balances the challenges of enforcing boundaries. In the context of love, boundaries play a particularly transformative role. Stoic love is not possessive or controlling, but grounded in a deep respect for the other person's individuality. This means that boundaries are not barriers to intimacy, but bridges to a healthier connection. By clearly communicating our needs and respecting our partner's boundaries, we create a relationship based on mutual trust and authenticity. This approach aligns with the Stoic ideal of living in harmony, where each person supports the other's growth without compromising their own values or well-being. In friendships too, boundaries serve as a safeguard against imbalance and resentment. While friendships are a source of joy and support, they can also become strained if one person consistently takes more than they give. Setting boundaries in these situations ensures that the relationship remains equitable, preserving its value for both parties. Stoicism reminds us that true friendship is based on virtue, not convenience or obligation. By maintaining healthy boundaries, we ensure that our friendships are rooted in mutual respect rather than dependency or exploitation. Even in professional relationships, Stoicism offers valuable guidance on boundaries and respect. Work environments can be challenging, with competing demands and diverse personalities. A Stoic approach involves identifying what is within our control, our actions, attitudes, and responses, and setting boundaries to protect our time, energy, and integrity. This might mean declining tasks that compromise our principles or addressing conflicts with calm and reason. By upholding these boundaries, we demonstrate both self-respect and professionalism, earning the respect of others in the process. Ultimately, Stoicism teaches us that boundaries and respect are not just tools for managing relationships, but expressions of our commitment to living a life of virtue. By setting boundaries with wisdom, enforcing them with courage, and communicating them with compassion, we honor both ourselves and those we interact with. Through this practice, we create relationships that are not only healthier, but also more meaningful, rooted in mutual understanding. In the Stoic perspective, boundaries and respect are essential elements of living a life rooted in virtue, balance, and harmony. They are not barriers to connection, but bridges to healthier, more meaningful relationships. Relationships where love, understanding, and mutual growth can truly flourish. By setting boundaries with clarity, upholding them with courage, and approaching them with compassion, we honor ourselves and those we care about. Stoicism reminds us that while we cannot control how others respond to our boundaries, we can always control how we enforce them, ensuring that we stay true to our values and our pursuit of a flourishing life. If you found this exploration of Stoicism and boundaries insightful, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who might benefit, and subscribe to the channel for more wisdom and practical insights to help you live a more virtuous and fulfilling life. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback is always welcome as part of this journey towards Stoic mastery. See you next time.